Me, my papa, and my uncle went camping. We hadn't planned to stay for too long, but I'd always loved camping and nature, so I was super excited. This time we didn't camp where we usually had before. Instead, we went to somewhere in Colorado, so it was about 10 hours till we got to this campsite. It was getting dark, and I had to get sticks for the fire. However, the entire time I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by something, so I quickened my gathering pace. Upon returning to the campsite, the 2 tents were set up, and I began setting stones in a circle. Soon after, I added the sticks in. I looked back at the woods and I saw what looked like a girl who looked to be older than a teen. I didn't like the idea of some teenager looking around our camp, so I told my uncle and he went to look, but upon searching around the area, he seemed to find nothing. The rest of the trip was somewhat normal, other than my papa and I vomiting for no reason and hearing voices off in the distance, and I swear I saw some eyes from the woods, but that could be anything. I'm not sure what was out there, but I'm fairly certain someone or something was. I don't know. Why were they watching me though? What are your guys' thoughts? My boyfriend and I frequently go camping together, and in the summer of 2016, we had the following encounter. We had set up camp in a little site along a trucking road. It was about 40 minutes outside of a smaller town in the area, and had only 2 campsites in this location. We chose the first site, which had a bit of dirt hill to drive down, but the actual site was shaped into a circle. The other site was within view, but far enough away and surrounded by enough trees that you couldn't really see people in it, only tents and RVs. We noticed that the other site had an RV in it, but it's a relatively common spot, so we thought nothing of this. When the sun went down, we were sitting around the fire, probably around 11 p.m., when we hear some ATVs in the distance. This is a little weird because typically people ride them during the day, but not really concerning. However, then we see the headlights get closer. 2 ATVs drive into our site, and at this point we're a little creeped out because of it being pitch black out and we're all alone in a no-service area. 2 men get off the ATVs and walk toward us. I should mention that my boyfriend and I were 19 and 20 at the time, and these men were very big. They come up and try holding just casual conversation, talking about how they're at the site beside us and wanted to introduce themselves. This is still a little concerning, as who introduces themselves this late at night? They continue to talk to us for probably 20 minutes before my boyfriend starts saying how we're running out of firewood and are probably going to head to bed soon in an effort to get them to leave. They then start talking about how they'll bring their own firewood over and bring us some drinks. We try saying we're really tired, but they insist and leave the site. My boyfriend and I quickly start trying to pack up the site and make it seem as though we're going to bed. We did hear the ATVs later on that night passing by our site, but we didn't get back out of our tent to check at all. Overall, it seems really mild, but it really freaked us out just being out alone in the woods with these 2 bigger men. The whole situation was just really off. 2 weeks after this though, we did see something on the news about a couple of bandits out in the woods beating and murdering a couple who were camping out there. So, whether it was those 2 men or not, I can't confirm it, but I think we might have dodged a bullet there. Roughly 4 years ago, when my wife and I were in college, we decided late one Saturday night to go exploring in a large forest close to the university we were attending. We bought some hiking gear, some flashlights, and some bear spray because someone had recently been killed by a bear in this forest. Before we drove over to one of the forest entrances at around 9 p.m., I'm not entirely sure when we decided to go, but it was pretty late, probably because of the adrenaline rush and the fact that the stars would look very beautiful with no light pollution. But in retrospect, it was a bad decision. We drove on the main road into the forest until it turned into a gravel road, and then we drove on that gravel road until it turned into a dirt road. It was about 30 minutes of driving into the forest total. We eventually found a narrow, dead-end drive where I could park my car. This drive was only about 30 yards long, so I decided to back my car into it, so it would be easier to get out when we left. It happened to be a new moon on this particular night, so it was pitch black into this deep forest. We got out and walked around with flashlights for a little while, but we were starting to get creeped out by how utterly dark it was, so we decided to go back to my car to do a different kind of exploring, if you catch my drift. We figured that we would not encounter anyone as deep as we were in the forest, and the dirt road we came in on forked numerous times, creating hundreds of possible driving paths. Plus, the drive we parked in on was the last one, so it would be really hard for someone to find us, in theory anyway. So we figured it would be nearly impossible for anyone to stumble here. After a few minutes, when little to no clothing remained on our bodies, we both saw a rusty beat-up pickup truck that looked to have been made at some point in the 1940s come around the corner on the dirt road that was connected to the drive we were parked in. With it being so dark, we assumed that the truck did not see us and would drive by, even though we were both a little freaked out that anyone would have happened to be on the same road as us this deep into the forest. The truck drew closer and closer to our drive. Then, our hearts sank when the truck turned on our narrow dead-end drive, thereby blocking us in and turned on its bright lights. I looked down at my phone and became even more disturbed when I realized we were not only in the middle of nowhere, with no clothing on and no weapons besides bear spray, but that we also had no cell service. The truck sat there just staring us down. We both sat in silence, unsure of what to do. We didn't want to make a run for it in the pitch black with no clothing on, but we couldn't move because the car was blocking us in. Then, after the longest 3 minutes of our lives, the truck backed up and continued driving down the dirt road. We immediately started the car and left the same way we came. We never went that deep into the forest again. This happened to me back in mid-October of 2018. On the 14th, I decided to go on a hunt around the mountain I live up on in northern New Jersey. I had my recurve bow strung up and had a quiver full of broadhead arrows as well as a couple flu-flus with blunts in case I saw a squirrel. My goal that day was to get me a deer, preferably a buck. I wasn't looking for a trophy or anything. I just wanted some meat and a nice hide to make brain-tanned buckskin. I was walking for quite some time when I came over a rise that dipped into a plateau with some drifts just beside the trail. I don't know what it was, but I felt a deer was somewhere down there. I've always had a sixth sense when it came to these kind of things. I got on my knees and started crawling along the trail. I wasn't looking up since I was trying to make sure where I moved so I wouldn't rustle the leaves to hear or snap a branch. Some 50 yards later, I peeked into a holler to my left, and lo and behold, I see tips of antlers sticking up. Just as I was about to stand up, the two bucks booked it and ran right out in front of me. They were around 30 yards away from me with their butts facing me, so I didn't have a shot. I took off my hat and put it on a log that I was hiding behind. There was a ridge right off the top of the trail that I was thinking about going up to hopefully get a shot at them from above. Unfortunately, I never got that chance. While lost in my planning, I heard some twigs snap behind me. I turned around and saw a cat. A big freaking cat. No more than 50 feet in the clear of day came a mountain lion walking parallel to me across the trail. It looked over at me and soon climbed up the ridge. After that, he walked towards the deer who were somewhere in another holler by then. This time, however, I couldn't comprehend what I had seen. I knew I saw something with short, light brown tan hair, a flat face, stocky legs and large paws. A long tail tucked in, with about half of it sticking out behind it, and a charcoal tip on the end of the tail. Having stoned and some saplings for reference, I was able to work out that from nose to butt this thing was a little over 5 feet, and with the tail fully extended was probably around 7 to 8 feet long. Anyway, What happened next was nothing short of idiocy at its finest. I climbed up the ridge and attempted to follow whatever the hell it was I had seen. After a few minutes, I began to realize both what I had seen and the gravity of the situation, as well as that the cougar either was too far at this point for it to be worth following, or more likely, considering the short span of time, it was hiding somewhere pissed off that I was following him. I wised up and climbed back down the trail. I pulled out my trusty 10-year-old flip phone and called my dad as well as some friends to let them know what had happened. I also told them where I'd probably be if, I got my throat ripped out. In short, I knocked a broadhead arrow on my bow and jogged the 2 miles back to my house, constantly looking back to make sure I wasn't being followed. I was lucky that day and could take a good bet that cougar cheated me out of a deer. Looking back though, I supposed it was his to begin with. He was stalking it first, after all. Now, to explain the significance of this, besides not getting mauled by a cougar, is that mountain lions aren't supposed to live where I live. Hell, they aren't even supposed to be anywhere along the East Coast according to the Department of Fish and Game. They're around for sure, considering I just saw one a few months back, and my dad heard a scream at 4 in the morning. A few days after my run-in with the cougar, he was listening to different wild cat calls, and it turned out to be a mating call of a female mountain lion. While my family and friends believe me according to the Fish and Game, I should be institutionalized. Keep in mind, the sighting took place at 12:15 in the afternoon with a bright sun and not a single cloud in the sky. I'm not crazy. Some have asked me why I didn't take out my phone and take a picture or a video. First off, my phone, as much as I love it, is crap for camera work. Also, the thing takes 30 seconds to turn on and another 10 for the camera to set up. The event was over in no more than a minute. Not to mention, besides my bow, all I had was my bush knife. I wasn't about to start making some Instagram live stream or whatever the hell it is that people do on smartphones. I was too busy making sure I wouldn't get mauled and die. So a few months ago, I was out hiking with my friend. We live in the mountains of western Maryland, and we were about 6 miles into an 8-mile loop we have done frequently when we decided to take some pictures and eat a snack at a summit. This area of the trail had parks, benches, tables, and a parking lot. We were sitting and talking, and I noticed a man just walking around the parking lot alone. He was walking aimlessly and staring at his feet. What confused me was that he was in jeans and a button-down shirt, not exactly hiking attire. We decided to set off on the last 2-mile leg of the trip. This park goes downhill to the headquarters of the park and is cut out of the mountain bank. The end of the leg is the parking lot where our car is. You don't have a lot of visibility from the trail and you have to walk single file. I was walking in front and talking to my friend. I turned to look at her and I see the same man right behind her, following at a rudely close distance. I immediately got a gut-wrenching feeling. I noticed that he didn't have any pack or hiking gear and was not even wearing boots. Something about his eyes really spooked me, so a bit more walking and he continues to follow very closely. I say to my friend that I have to tie my shoe as a reason to step off the trail and let him pass us, in case he is only following closely because he wants to walk faster than we are. She immediately catches on to what I'm doing and we pull over. He looks startled and says hello politely. He just stares. This is when I notice that he is carrying a stick. As I'm fiddling with my shoe, she stands between us and he passes. We waited to give him some distance ahead of us, but he immediately slows down. We wait a bit longer, and he gets the furthest part of the trail that has sight lines to us, and he turns around, looking up at us. We decided that something feels too wrong about this guy, and we don't want to have to pass him again. So we turned around and walked back up the trail towards the park with the tables and parking. A few minutes of walking up the trail and I look back to see him walking up the trail too. Now we know he's following us. I tell my friend to walk faster. We book it up the trail and get to the parking lot area where we were before. We start to strategize and wait, deciding that we will see if he comes back up to the trail or not. There are more people here, so we felt a little safe waiting it out. About 20 minutes go by and nothing. We are talking about how that could mean that he kept going on the trail and is long gone, or is waiting on the trail where it is more deserted. We see a couple come up from the trail where we were, presumably taking the loop in the opposite direction that we were. We approached them and asked if they saw anyone on the trail, next to this lot and the next. They tell us they saw a young man sitting on a rock about halfway down. They described the man who was following us. We explain our interaction with them to the wife and get into a conversation back and forth about whether or not he was a threat. The husband finally interjects and said, "We need to call a ranger. He wasn't just sitting there. He had a knife and was carving that stick." Needless to say, we called our park ranger. The nice couple walked that last leg with us to make sure we got to our car safely, and even gave us their numbers in case we needed anything. The rangers then walked the trail, but there was no sight of him. I wish I knew where he went and what happened to him, but I'm glad to know that my instincts are legitimate. My whole life I've just sort of felt like spirits and the like have been drawn to me for some reason. Like they connect to me for being some weird or something. Just a little bit of background before I get into this whole ordeal. When I was around 11, I moved out of my old home, which had its own little set of ghosties, and moved to a small town in an old trailer near the forest. Like, my backyard was the woods when I moved there. I spent a lot of time in those woods, chasing deer and squirrels. I was in love with those woods, but around a year after I moved in, things started getting creepy. While spending time out in the woods, I was leaning against a fallen log and sketching in a journal when everything went silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Everything just went silent. The whole world stayed still for so long. I know this should have thrown up a bunch of red flags, but being my naive 12-year-old self, I continued to sit there and sketch. After about 15 minutes of the silence, I heard something crackle, like branches being stepped on and broken. I looked up, expecting it to be one of my 4 siblings, but I was met with the stare of this odd little girl in a tattered pair of overalls and rain boots. Now, this was private property. No way in or out other than through my property, so I didn't know how she got there. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old at the most. "Hey honey, are you lost?" I asked as I set down my pencil and journal. She continued to stare at me, and just stare there, with this blank face. "Hey, did you hear me? Where are your parents?" I called out to her again. Her whole demeanor changed and she just seemed to flicker with static electricity as she was releasing this blood-curdling scream that just hurt my ears that I had to cover them. This 4, 6, 7-year-old with blonde pigtails just wailed. You would think that would set off birds and deer, but nothing stirred and her face went back to the absolute stillness it was. The scream had knocked me backwards and I was slightly terrified. I watched her for a second and turned my gaze toward the trail just for a split second, and then turned back to find nothing. She was gone, and so was my pencil and journal. I don't know what she was, where she came from, or where she went, but God did she scare the hell out of me. I haven't seen her since, and I really hope I don't ever see her again, because I really don't plan on wanting to interact with her ever again. Let me know if you guys have ever heard anything like this. I did Google it and it does kind of sound like a siren, but I don't think it's the same thing.